everyone, and welcome back to Heaven Official's Blessing, the Chinese web novel that we started a month or two ago, but we put on hold for Halloween. And funny enough, on October 31st, the first episode of the Donghua aired. They're now up to 3 episodes, and everything I've seen looks really great, so I'm very excited that this lovely book has an adaptation as a show, which we will have to watch at some point soon. Today, we are starting chapter 35. Where did my Oh, there's my PDF. Chapter 35, which is the beginning of a very fun arc. Hello, Jeff and Callie Mae, Lobsel, Lucia, Cygnus. Thanks for joining us. If you vaguely remember last time, our hero, Shi Lian, had finished a kind of a storyline and been called up to heaven. He ended up speaking to the Windmaster, meeting the Windmaster, and finding out that he is a she, or really likes to change bodies, and was assigned a mission to go to the Ghost City and investigate, because a member of the heavens had sent off a distress signal, and it was from the Ghost City, which happens to be Hua Cheng's backyard. So Shi Lian is heading into his territory in disguise, secretly, to try and figure out what's going on. So, Chapter 35. Enter the Ghost City. Rendezvous with the Ghost King. Much ashamed, it wasn't until 4 hours later that Shi Lian had the time to sneak a peek at his scroll and finally learn the backstory of this Wind Master. The 5 elemental masters of the heavens used their titles to replace their names. For example, before the Earth Master ascended, his mortal name was called Ming Yi. After ascension, he was to be addressed as Earth Master Yi. As for the Wind Master, his old name was Shi Qingxuan. Qingxuan, I believe is how it's said. After ascension, he was called Wing Master Qingxuan. Much fitting his title, his personality was like a breeze. He was sociable and generous, mindless of petty details, and very popular in the heavens, as apparent from him easily handing out 10,000 merits in the communication array. But at the end of the day, as his older brother was the god who controlled mortal wealth, of course the Windmaster was generous and mindless of petty details. Indeed, the older brother of Windmaster Qingxuan was the one called Water Tyrant, the Water Master Wudu. Descending to the underworld together, the 2 gods walked side by side, chatting as they traveled. Shi Lian had his arms crossed and commented in amazement. The Pei family producing 2 ascending generals under one name was already a legend, but you and your brother, one wind, one water, ascending at the same time, is truly a tale of wonder. It must be known that even in a million there may not be that one who had the ability to ascend. Pei Ming and Pei Su were separated by a few hundred years, and Pei Su wasn't even a direct descendant. He was from Pei Ming's brother's branch of the family. That was who knows how many times removed through the generations. The Water Master Wudu and the Wind Master Qingxuan were real blood-related brothers, a real pair of ascended officials from the same house. Thus, truly incredible. Shi Qingyuan laughed it off, saying, "It's nothing. My brother and I were born from the same mother, grew up together, went to school together, cultivated together, so naturally we'd ascend together in the same lifetime." Shi Lian also learned about this when he was cramming from the scroll earlier. Shi Wudu ascended first, but after only a few years, his brother Shi Qingyuan also successfully passed a heavenly calamity. Mortals often worshipped the 2 heavenly officials together in the same temple, and praised them as equals. It was obvious the 2 brothers enjoyed a good relationship. As Sun Long and Nan Feng had mentioned, the Water Master must be the reason Pei Ming wouldn't touch the Wind Master. After all, the brother of the Water Tyrant was not one to be picked on easily. Coming to this point, Shi Lian thought of another detail, and considered it before asking. "Lord Windmaster, at the Great Martial Hall earlier, the way General Pei spoke, it sounded as if he shared a friendship with your brother. Wouldn't your filing the complaint against General Pei Jr. affect—" "Nah," Shi Qingxuan replied. "I think I've said his name 5 different ways. One day I'll settle on the proper way." Qingxuan, I think, replied, "My brother already knows I can't stand Pei Ming." "Knowing is one thing, action is another," Shi Lian said. Wouldn't all of this cause a rift between the Watermaster and General Pei? If that caused a rift, even better. I wish my brother would stop hanging out with him and leave the Three Tumors moniker behind one day, Shi Qingyuan said. Shi Lian stopped. 3 tumors? Shi Qingyuan exclaimed, astonished. What? You don't know about this either? Fine, whatever. I now know you're not up to date with anything. You can just listen for giggles. The 3 tumors is the nickname given to the 3 heavenly officials who don't have a very good rep, but they have a good relationship with each other. They're Ming Guang, Ling Wen, and my brother. I can't believe it's not Shi Lian, and Shi Lian, Shi Lian thought. What chapter is this? Hi, Ichirok. This is chapter 35. Shi Qingyuan fanned his Windmaster fan and continued. Even if I can't stand him, the whole business this time around was started by little Pei himself. There's no way I'd let Pei Ming pin this on the Gyoshi of Banyu and protect little Pei. It doesn't matter if you're a god, a mortal, or a ghost. You have to be responsible for your own actions. Bullying a little girl is low. The last line was uttered in contempt, and Shi Lian smiled. The Windmaster is a defender of justice. Shi Qingyuan laughed. You're not bad yourself. I've heard rumors about the Banyu Pass here and there, but never had time to investigate. Plus, my brother would yell at me about it. With so much on my plate, I'd forgotten. When I heard you inquire about it in the communication array the other day, it reminded me there was a case. So I went to check it out. Turns out, not only did you ask, you'd gone yourself. So I thought, dang, what a guy. Yeah, and Kali May says there's a pronunciation guide. There is, and someone was kind enough to send it to me, and I meant to print it out. But with everything that happened over October and Halloween, I completely got distracted from preparing for the web novel readings. So that'll happen this week, I hope. This Windmaster certainly had an extremely straightforward and interesting personality, and Shi Lian could understand now why he was so popular in the heavens. He hadn't thought that after Ascension he'd be able to form a friendship with a heavenly official like this, and couldn't help but smile happily. But just as he turned his head to face him, the white-clad cultivator beside him was transformed to a lady in white. It was so sudden, Shi Lian almost tripped in his step. Let's see, Ankalime says it is probably Qin Shu Yen. I think you're right, because I'm pretty sure, well, I know Q's are basically C's, and I think X's tend to be S's. But for some reason, when I say it out loud, I skip the X, and I just go Qing Yuan. I don't know why my mouth doesn't want to make that sound. Qing Shuen. Maybe it's me trying to make it 2 syllables, and it's 3. Qing Shuen. Qin Shuen. Shi Qing Shuen. We'll get there. This Windmaster certainly had... Did I read that? Yes. Lord Windmaster, why the sudden transformation? Oh, truth be told, I'm actually more powerful in this form, Shi Qingxuan replied. As forementioned, the Windmaster and the Watermaster were often worshipped together. However, this produced a bizarre accident. Perhaps people thought worshipping 2 male gods together in one temple was weird. Lords and ladies go hand in hand, handsome and beautiful make a pair, that should be the way. Thus, after a while, someone, somewhere, sculpted the Windmaster as a goddess. Never mind the goddess statue, they had to make up stories to go with it. Something along the lines of the wind and water gods used to be brother and sister, there was even a version where they were husband and wife. After a few hundred years, the story spread, and from there came even more outlandish legends. Once in a while, the 2 officials would read through the tales out of curiosity, but each time they would cringe and fill an entire coop with goosebumps. Nevertheless, there were more than a few who believed in the outrageous stories, and the Windmaster's gender started getting mixed up. "My lady, prithee watch over me," could be heard all over the place. Thus, Shi Qingxuan gained the name Lady Windmaster. Hi, Serena. And Leon, hello. Although silly, it was actually not that rare of an occurrence. Ling Wen, for example, also had a similar experience. Ling Wen was a lady official, but she didn't dress colorfully and fashionably like the other lady deities. She was often in black, serious and competent, and spent her days madly working through the stacks and stacks of administrative scrolls in her palace. Although her personality was partly to blame, much of it was due to another reason. If one should ask any mortal, is Ling Wen a man or a woman, anyone would respond with confidence, a man. A civil god was of course a male. For this alone, when Ling Wen ascended, she suffered disadvantages. She was a civil goddess, but many in the mortal realm thought, how could a woman be in that position? How could ladies possibly endure good fortune in literary competence? It must not be effective. Thus, although she worked hard, she still had very few devotees. Later, some of the devotees couldn't get over it and rebuilt her statues into male gods, transforming her from the goddess Ling Wen to the god Ling Wen, and even made up an entire extravagant backstory. After this change, her temples became prosperous, and everyone praised how effective the god Ling Wen was. But the truth was, an official was an official, spiritual powers were all the same, and the legends were all fake. Still, the people ate them up. Since then, when Ling Wen needed to appear in dreams, she could only do so in a male form. What kind of bullshit is that? I do love the detail that this story goes into to explain how the function of being a god works and the way that people influence it. By the same logic, people believed it was more appropriate to worship a man and a woman as a pair in the wind and water temples. Who cared if you were a god or a ghost? You must appear as people believed. Appearances could be different by 1,000,000 miles, and people would still see what they wanted to see. The upper court heavenly officials no longer cared for this kind of thing. As for Qin Shuan himself, by Shi Lian's own observations, he didn't appear to mind at all. In fact, he was completely immersed in enjoying himself and was even passionately dragging others into it, making Shi Lian wonder about the real identity of the lady in black that was with the Windmaster last time. In the 4 hours they'd spent traveling to the underworld together, Qin Shuan had been tirelessly trying to persuade Shi Lian into disguising himself as a woman, with very convincing reasons like, women have stronger auras of yin, therefore it's much easier to hide in the Ghost City crowds. I really love, there's a lot of headcanons with Qin Shuan as a transgender person, a non-binary person. I love it, I'm here for it. To explain this concept, the concepts of yin and yang, which come from Taoism, which we've discussed, are associated with genders. Yang is good, heavenly, male. Yin is female, darkness. So ghosts would be yin energy, and so are women. So women would blend in better with ghosts, is the theory. This is a very good explanation of all those books in Kali Mace. Scum villain, everyone is gay. Modal Zushi, everyone except Wang Zhen is straight. And a heaven official's blessing. What is gender? This is basically it. Shi Lian thought about it and courteously rejected the idea. I don't have enough power to transform. I'll lend you my powers, Qin Shuan replied excitedly. That's the whole reason why the Heavenly Emperor appointed me to this mission, no? My lord, please save your powers for when we're actually fighting the enemy. I also love that his reasons are very much rooted in logic and not the idea that he wouldn't be open to trying it. Qin Shuan couldn't persuade Shi Lian, so she stopped pushing. At this time, the two had reached a wild field in the middle of nowhere. The night had deepened, and crows cawed crazedly in the darkness, creating an eerie atmosphere. Shi Lian scanned around and said, Let's wait here. An evil aura fills the air here, and there's a large graveyard nearby, so there's definitely going to be 1 or 2 going to the market. We'll follow them when the time comes. Thus, the two crouched on top of a burial mound and waited. A moment later, Qin Shuan put one hand into a sleeve, rummaged around, and dug out a small jug of booze. You want some? Shi Lian reached for the jug and took a small sip, feeling his throat burn, and gave the jug back. Thanks. Qin Shuan took the jug and gulped a couple swallows. You can't drink? I can, Shi Lian replied, but drinking causes insanity, so just a taste is enough. What time is it? Qin Shuan hummed and replied, It's midnight. Must be soon then, Shi Lian said. Just as he finished his sentence, the two saw a faint row of lights appear deep in the woods. That faint row of lights slowly came closer and closer, until finally the two could see it was a group of expressionless women dressed in white, walking in a line. Some were old, some were young, some beautiful, some ugly, each wearing funeral garb with a white lantern in hand, walking at an easy pace. This must be female ghosts heading to the Ghost City markets in the deep night. Let's follow them, Shi Lian said under his breath. Qin Shuan nodded and took a last sip from the jug and threw it aside. The two stood up and casually trailed behind behind the group of ghosts. The two had already prepared beforehand and erased their spiritual aura. When they walked, they were like people-shaped logs without a scent of life. The band of female ghosts before them held their white lanterns and followed an unknown path in the darkened woods, strolled while chatting in high-pitched, delicate voices. "I'm so glad the ghost city's opened again. I need a facial," one said. "What happened to your face? Didn't you just recently get a facial?" another replied. The first one responded, "It rotted again. The one who serviced me last time said it was guaranteed fresh for a year. It hasn't even been half a year." Shi Lian and Shi Qingxuan trailed behind them, listening to their chatter, and didn't speak a word. When they heard something funny, they'd often lift their lips and eye each other. About an hour later, the group came to a valley. Red light emitted from deep within the valley, and there seemed to be music wafting in the ethereal night. Shi Lian grew more and more curious to finally see for himself what the ghost city looked like. As they were entering the valley, however, the last one in the line of ghosts suddenly turned her head and discovered them. Confused, she asked, "Who are you two?" The question made all the pale-faced heads turn, and the women surrounded them, curious. "When did they start following us? Those two weren't part of the group when we left the burial grounds. Which burial ground did you come from? How come we've never seen your faces before?" Shi Lian cleared his throat. "We came from a burial ground much further away, so of course you've never seen us." Shi Qingxuan smiled too. "That's right. We've traveled thousands of miles just for the ghost city." The group of white-clad female ghosts were silent and expressionlessly stared at them. If it was anyone else, they'd probably fall to the ground, shivering in fright. Shi Lian wasn't afraid of having their identities exposed. These weak feral ghosts had no power over them. However, since the ghost city was right before their eyes, it wouldn't be wise to start anything in such close distance to the target, lest they alert their enemies. Just then, one of the women staring at Shi Qingxuan spoke up languidly. "Mei Mei, your face is very nicely maintained." Mei Mei means sister. She said. Shi Lian and Shi Qingxuan stopped. Immediately, the two of them nodded uniformly. Shi Lian replied, "It's all right, not bad." Shi Qingxuan copied his tone and said, "Pretty good, right?" All the female ghosts approached and started a discussion. "Yeah, not rotten at all. Mei Mei, where did you get your facials done? What's your secret? Can you recommend a place?" Shi Qingxuan didn't know how to respond, so she only laughed awkwardly to delay answering. Just then, the group turned round and a sudden crimson brightness flashed into their eyes. A mysterious and haunted world opened before them. A long street appeared. It was so long there was no end in sight. Along the street were all manners of bustling stores and stalls. Colorful signs were flown high above, and giant red lanterns were hung low. Pedestrians filled the street, many wearing masks of faces crying, laughing, angry, some human, some not human. Those without masks could only be described as bizarre. Some had large heads and small bodies, some skinny as a bamboo stick, some flat like a pancake, pressing on the ground, letting pedestrians walk all over them while complaining. Shi Lian was careful not to step on anything weird. When he passed by a food stall, he saw the stall owner use a giant bone to stir a giant pot of soup. While it stirred, spit would spill from between its teeth, dripping into the soup, and in that soup filled with weird colors floated many an eyeball. Shi Lian watched and suddenly gained confidence. On the other side, there were strange buskers performing. A buff, burly man had a small ghost, weak as a chick, in his hold, and the man opened his mouth to blow massive flames to barbecue the small ghost while it squealed like a dying pig, writhing. The crowd cheered and shrieked, shouting encore. There were even insane individuals randomly throwing money into the air, and when one slip of it flew before Shi Lian, he grabbed one and flipped it over. It was the money of the dead, as he thought. I had the same thought, Jeff, about the fact that this is kind of similar to a Miyazaki film, specifically when the little girl enters the bathhouse in Spirited Away. I'm sure that the legends that are being drawn from here probably come from similar places. As he walked, there was a butcher stall with a row of crestfallen human heads, hung in order of age, as indicated on their price tags. A child's head was this much, a youth's meat was that much, a grown man's flesh cost this amount, a mature woman's sinews was charged this much, and so on. The one dressed in an apron with a butcher knife in hand was a boar with black thick hair, and under its knife getting butchered was a muscular human leg, still twitching. This truly was a swarm of evil, the chaos of hell. Humans butchering pigs was a common sight, but pigs butchering humans wasn't, so Shilian couldn't help but steal a few extra peeks. The boar noticed him watching and immediately reacted. "What are you looking at? You buyin'?" Shilian shook his head. No. The boar butcher continued to chop onto the cutting board violently, blood spraying all over. He yelled, voice rough, "If you ain't buyin', then don't watch. Fucking trying to start something? Get out of here." Shilian got out of there, but as his steps quickened, he suddenly realized something very bad. The group of female ghosts and Shi Qingshuan had disappeared without a trace. In shock, Shilian wanted to connect with the Windmaster at once within the communication array, afraid she really got dragged away by those ghosts to do facials. However, this was Ghost City, and the spells used by Heaven were heavily restricted. The connection to the array didn't work, so he had to wander the streets to search for the missing Windmaster. As he walked, someone suddenly grabbed him. Already alert and tense, Shilian instantly reacted. Who? The one who stopped him was a woman, and was surprised by Shilian's reaction. But after seeing his face clearly, she started giggling, playing coy. "Hey there, little Gege." Or Guga. That's how it's said, we decided. "Hey there, little Guga. You're looking mighty fine." The woman was in an exceedingly revealing dress, her makeup terrifyingly heavy, the white foundation uneven. When she opened her mouth, clumps of it would fall off her face. Her bosom was stuffed full as if something was filled in her flesh. Truly a shocking sight. Shilian gently pushed away her thin, claw-like fingers and said, "My lady, there's no need to speak like this." The woman was taken aback, then burst out laughing. "Dear Lord, my lady! Who the hell still calls me a lady in this day and age?" All the passerbys seemed to think it was funny too, and started laughing along. Shilian shook his head, but before he could speak, the woman pounced on him. "Don't go! Little Guga, I like you. Come and have fun with me all night. I won't ask for payment." She pouted and winked. "But I will charge." Shilian sighed and prayed inwardly, then unobtrusively but firmly pushed her away. He chided gently, "My lady, please." The woman seemed annoyed now and screeched, "Stop calling me lady. No one cares for it. Quit wasting my time. You comin' or not?" To tempt Shilian further, the woman suddenly unlaced her already revealing shirt. Shilian wasn't prepared to face such a bold move and sighed again before turning away and continuing on his way. The female ghost chased after him and continued her seduction. "Do you like what you see?" Little did she realize, Shilian had grown up in the Royal Holy Pavilion, practicing abstinence for most of his mortal life. His body and mind had always been as steady as the mountains. It didn't matter what he saw, his heart was still like water. Anything unseemly would have had him automatically chant sutras in his mind, calming his spirit. Unsuccessful in her temptation, the female ghost's expression changed, and she started yelling, "You don't want any of this? Are you even a man?" Shilian dropped his eyes. "I am." "Then prove it," the female ghost yelled. From the sidelines, a passerby laughed mockingly. "You slut! He thinks you're old and ugly and wants none of you. What are you doing so clingy?" Hearing those words, Shilian deadpanned with a straight face. It's not that. It's because I have an unspeakable affliction. I cannot get erect." Everyone fell silent. Then, with an instant, they all roared and hollered with laughter. The victim of ridicule was now Shilian. No one had ever met a man who was brave enough to announce to the world they had such a problem. However, to someone like Shilian, It didn't matter whether his private member was functional or not, so he already developed the habit of using that as an excuse to get out of these kinds of situations. And it was a method that worked every time. Sure enough, the ghost redid her shirt and stopped clinging onto him. No wonder you're like this. What a pig. If you had a problem, why didn't you say so sooner? Not far behind them, the boar butcher threw down his knife again and yelled, "Fucking slut! What's that you say? What's wrong with pigs?" The female ghost wasn't scared and yelled right back, "Yeah, what's wrong with pigs? Fucking animals!" Soon the long street was filled with shouting and squawking, people hollering. That female ghost Lan Chang is starting shit again. Butcher Zhu is chopping up ghosts. The two sides buzzed back and forth, rowdy and chaotic. And in the midst of that pandemonium, Shidian was finally able to slip away. After walking for a bit, he looked back over to where the crowd was and heaved a sigh. Shidian continued walking and soon came upon another rowdy crowd ahead, and he stopped in front of a gigantic red building. This building was extraordinarily grandiose and imposing. Its columns, roofs, walls, everything was painted in a magnificent bright red, and the floors were covered in thick, exquisite carpet. If it must be compared, this building was on par with the heavenly palaces. The only difference was that it was more bedazzling than dignified. Large crowds went in and out of the doors, and inside was filled with loud, excited voices, very lively. Upon a closer look, Shidian found that this place was a gambler's den. Shidian walked up to the doors, and on the two pillars at the entrance there was a set of verses. The left said, "Money over life," the right said, "Gains over shame." On the top horizontal beam, it said, "Ha ha ha ha." There's a little note here, let's see. Entrance verses are 3 lines of poetry that express the meaning or theme of the establishment or are for good luck. 1 line on each side of the door and 1 over the top. So that's the theme of this building. It was vulgar and crass, not worthy of being entrance verses. The calligraphy was also wild, clumsy, and frenzied, a disgrace to call it calligraphy at all. It was as if someone took a brush while drunk and scribbled with malintent, and the words got blown by a blast of evil aura before they were formed thus. Shidian was once heir to the throne, and his calligraphy was taught by the best teachers in the land. The characters he saw before him now were a real tragedy. In fact, the characters were so hellish that Shidian was starting to think they were kind of funny, and shook his head. The Windmaster wouldn't be hanging around here. He'd have a better chance searching in beauty parlors for female ghosts. He certainly should have just moved on, yet inexplicably, after only a few steps, he turned around and went inside. In the main hall of the gambler's den, crowds were packed to the brim. Innumerous heads moving, laughter and desperate cries crammed the air. Shidian had only descended a few steps when he suddenly heard screaming, and when he looked to where it had come from, 4 masked bouncers were walking over, carrying another. That man was in pain, writhing and howling whilst being carried, and a trail of blood followed. Turns out, both of his legs were cleanly cut off from the knees, and blood was pouring from the stumps. A small ghost followed closely and greedily licked up all the blood on the floor as they went. It was a terrifying sight, yet no one in the gambler's den spared it any looks, and continued to shout and cheer, rolling about. Though of course many who gambled here weren't people, and if they were, then they were no ordinary humans. Shidian slided his body to let pass the 4 bouncers carrying the man, and then continued going deeper into the den. A petite attendant in a laughing mask approached him and welcomed him. "Sir, are you here to play?" Shidian gave a small smile. "I don't have any money on me. Mind if I just look?" In his experience, usually if you said those words in any establishment, you'd get booted. Why would you enter without money? Yet the petite attendant still giggled. "No money is not a problem. Those who play here don't really use money to gamble." So the episodes are out for these. When do you think we'll be able to watch them? I wanted to tonight. It looks like I have a family thing coming up and we won't be able to. So the next night that we have free, we will probably do that. Though we have 3 more episodes of Scum Villain to finish too. So we'll have to have a night where we watch these. "Really?" Shidian asked. The petite attendant covered her mouth. "Really, sir? Why don't you come with me?" She waved at Shidian and sashayed away. Lian followed behind her without a word, but carefully observed all around. This gambler's den from the inside out was exceedingly extravagant and stylish, but not tacky. It was a building rich with taste. The petite attendant brought Lian to the very back of the main hall. There was a long table that was packed like sardines. Lian had only just approached, and he heard a man cry, "I bet my arm!" There were too many onlookers. Lian couldn't get through and could only listen from outside the crowd. Suddenly, he heard another voice lazily responding, "No need. Never mind your arm. Even your shit life is worthless here." Hearing the voice, Lian's heart jumped. He silently mouthed the name, San Long. When he heard was indeed the voice of the young man, yet it was slightly deeper than he remembered. However, it was because of this that it sounded even more pleasing to the ears. Although he was surrounded by boisterous brouhahas, the voice still rang loud and clear, and cut through the noise of the gambler's den and into his ears. Lian looked up and found that behind the long table there was a screen curtain, and behind the curtain he could see a faint red figure laid back leisurely on a long chair. He's found his boyfriend. Somehow he knew it was his boyfriend's gambling den, because his power is luck, isn't it? And so gambling is his thing. Chapter 36 now. Admiring the flower through red clouds, a heart full of sympathy. The words that came out of Hua Cheng's mouth were exceedingly condescending and rude, but the moment he spoke, the man in question allowed taunting from all around and dared not fight back. The attendant who had led Lian to the long table smiled. "Young master, you're very lucky today." Lian never moved his gaze from the long table. "How so?" "Our Lord is here to play," the attendant replied. "It's only these past couple of days that he was in the mood to pass by, so isn't this good luck?" By her tone, Lian could tell that the attendant had great respect for the Lord and very much idolized him, as if just seeing him was the greatest of honors. Lian couldn't help but smile. The screen curtain was soft and silky, the red silhouette captivating. Such a sight was truly enchanting. In front of the red curtain were a couple of charming women overlooking the gambling table. At first, Lian was content to just watch from the background, but the moment he heard Hua Cheng's voice, he started trying to push himself through the crowd without drawing any attention to the fact he was there. Finally, he made it through to the table and saw the man who was in the middle of putting down his bets. It was a human. Lian wasn't surprised, since it was already known that within Ghost City there weren't just ghosts. There were also many cultivators with considerable skill, and sometimes mere mortals who were looking for their own death. The gambling man had a mask on, but both his eyes were visible, bulging and laced with red as if bleeding. His lips were pale as if he hadn't seen the sun in days. He was a picture of a ghost more so than any ghosts present. Both of his hands were pressed tightly on a black wooden dice cup on the table, and after holding back for a moment, he shouted, seeming to have given up on everything. "But how come the other guy was able to bet both his legs?" One of the croupers before the red curtain smiled. "The one before used to be an acclaimed bandit, who was known for his light footwork and ability to take flight wherever he went. It was the crux of his life, so his legs were a worthy bet. You're neither an artisan nor a medic. What worth does your arm possess?" The man gritted his teeth. "Then I bet 10 years' worth of my only daughter's life." Lian was stunned to hear these words and thought, where on earth is there a father who is willing to bet on the life of his children? Is that even possible? Behind the curtain, Hua Cheng only snorted. "Very well." Lian couldn't tell if it was his imagination, but he could sense coldness from those words. But then he added mentally, "San Long has always said he has good luck, and all of his fortune sticks came up with the best of luck. If he bets against this man, wouldn't he win for sure and take away 10 years of life from the man's daughter?" He was just thinking this when the crouper announced sweetly, "Even will be a loss, odds will be a win. Once the cup is open, there will be no turning back. Now please." Turns out Hua Cheng wouldn't be betting in the pool in the first place. That man shook the gambling cup haphazardly, both hands grasping onto it hard, and the hall quieted down. The sounds of the dice rattling could be heard loud and crisply. Then his movement slowed to a stop. Silence reigned. It was after a long moment before the man slowly, very slowly, lifted a corner of the gambling cup and peeked through the gap. His red eyes suddenly widened. He flipped over the cup and shouted with mad joy, Odd! Odd! I won! I've won! This was not the outcome the crowd of humans and ghosts surrounding the long table wanted to see, and they started booing down the man, slapping the table and shouting their discontent. One of the croupers smiled and said, Congratulations. The fate of your business will soon see a turnaround. The man laughed uproariously and cried, Wait, I want to bet again! The crouper smiled. You're welcome to. What do you want this time? The man's face dropped and said, I want everyone competing with me in my business to drop dead. Hearing this, the crowd started muttering and clicking their tongues. The crouper raised a hand to cover her smile. If that is what you wish, then it's much more difficult to fulfill than your previous wish. Won't you consider a different wish, like asking for your business to flourish? Yet the man replied with his eyes red, No, that's the only thing I want to bet on. That's what I'm betting for. Then if that is your wish, 10 years of your daughter's life may not be enough, the crouper said. If that's not enough, I'll bet 20 years of her life, and the fate of her marriage on top of it. The crowd was stunned and burst out laughing. The man's lost his mind. He's selling his daughter. Amazing. Too amazing. The crouper announced once again, Even will be a loss, odd will be a win. Once the cup is open, there will be no going back. Now please. The man took up the gambling cup once more, his hands shaking. If he lost, then his daughter would lose 20 years of her life and a good marriage. Obviously not ideal. But if he won, then all of his competitors would drop dead? Although Shilian thought Hua Cheng would never let such a thing happen, after much hesitation he still stepped forward. He was just thinking on whether he should join in using some small trick when suddenly someone grabbed hold of him. He turned his head to see, and it was Shi Qingxuan. Shi Qingxuan had returned to his male form and whispered, Don't be rash. Shilian whispered back, Lord Windmaster, why did you transform back? It's a long story, Shi Qingxuan sighed. That group of women dragged me around saying they were going to introduce me to the good beauty parlors. I finally escaped, but they caught me again, so I had to change back. They dragged me to a place that smeared so much stuff on my face. Pulling, stretching, slapping, smacking. Quick, check my face. How is it? Anything wrong? Do you see anything off with my face? He pushed his face right up to Shilian to be inspected, and Shilian dutifully gave it a detailed look before replying truthfully, I think it looks even smoother than before. Shi Qingxuan brightened immediately. Really? Oh, good. That's wonderful. Is there a mirror? Where's a mirror? I want to see. Look later, Shilian said. The ghost city is blocking our spiritual communication, so let's not lose each other again. By the way, how did you know I was here? I didn't, Shi Qingxuan replied. I came here because Qianchu had already agreed to meet here. When we lost each other earlier, I just came here instead, but when I walked in, turns out you were here too. You called Qianchu out? Shilian asked. To meet here? Yeah, Shi Qingxuan replied. Qianchu is the Lang Qianchu, His Highness Ta Hua. You know that much at least. He's the martial god of the East. Since we're here, it's best if he came too. The Gambler's Den is one of the most bustling and most chaotic places in Ghost City. It's a landmark. Many people and ghosts alike go in and out, and it's much less conspicuous for us to be about. So I told him to meet us here. Shilian nodded. When he turned back to the long table, the man still hadn't opened the cup. His eyes were rolled back and he was muttering, not unlike many of the ghosts here. Shilian sighed. This man. Shi Qingxuan said he felt his face. Said as he felt his face. I guess like this. I know what you want to say, and I agree. But the ghost city is Hua Cheng's territory, and the rules here we're all adhered to willingly. If you dare gamble, then you can play. The heavens can do nothing. Let's just observe, and we can come up with something if anything gets out of hand. Shilian hummed, thinking there was no way San Lang would allow anything to get out of hand, so it would indeed be best to just observe. The gambling man finally seemed to gather enough courage and opened just a sliver of the gambling cup to reveal the outcome. Just then, another person busted in, shut down the gambling cup with a strike, and cut it to pieces. The strike not only crushed the gambling cup, but also the hand that was on top of it, and the entire table splintered with a deep crack. The masked man cradled his crushed hand and rolled all over the floor screaming. The crowd of ghosts also started shouting, some cheering and some crying in shock. The person who struck out yelled, "You! What a villainous heart! If you wished for wealth and fortune, then no matter. But you wished for others to drop dead? If you wanted to bet, then have the guts to bet your own life, and not the life and marriage of your daughter. You're not fit to be a man, not fit to be a father." Yeah. Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us. Let me adjust my position here. My knee's going numb. Ow. The young man had sword-like brows and stars for eyes, bursting with heroic aura. Although his clothes were simple and not a bit glamorous, his air of nobility couldn't be concealed. It was none other than the crown prince of Yong'an, Lang Qiangchu. Seeing him, Shi Lian and Shi Qingxuan both covered their faces at the same time. Shi Lian groaned. "Lord Windmaster, did you not tell him to be a little more careful and keep it low-key?" Shi Qingxuan whined back. I told him, but he's always like that. What can I do? Had I known earlier, I would have planned for us to come down together." Shi Lian sympathized. "I understand." Just then, Hua Cheng chuckled lightly from behind the curtains. Shi Lian's heart skipped a beat. The boy had often laughed when he was with Shi Lian, so now Shi Lian was able to tell somewhat whether the laughter was genuine happiness, mockery, or laced with killing intent. A voice said lazily, "You must have guts of steel to start trouble in my territory." Lang Qiangchu turned to face the direction of the voice with fire in his eyes. "Are you the owner of this gambler's den?" The crowd jeered. "Foolish bastard, do you know who you're talking to? This is our lord!" Some sneered coldly. "Not only does he own this gambler's den, this entire ghost city is his." Lang Qiangchu barely showed any reaction when hearing this, but Shi Qingxuan, on the other hand, was completely taken aback. "Oh, my dear God, is that who I think it is behind the curtain?" Shi Lian answered, "Yes, it's him." Shi Qingxuan asked again, "Are you sure?" Shi Lian replied, "I'm certain." Shi Qingxuan panicked. We're dead. What do we do about Qiangchu now?" Shi Lian said after a while, "Let's hope he doesn't expose himself." Yet the more Lang Qiangchu looked around, the angrier he became, and he demanded, "This hellish place reeks of smoke and corruption and is filled to the brim with demonic chaos. What kind of scum are you? Just what do you think you're doing here? Running a place like this? You don't really have a single trace of humanity in you." The crowd booed in unison. This man cannot read a room. "We ain't humans anyway. What do we need humanity for? That sort of useless notion. Whoever wants it can take it. Who do you think you are, coming all the way here to point fingers at us?" Hua Cheng said, amused, "This den of mine has been a mad, hellish place to begin with. There's a path for you in heaven, but you refuse to take it and instead choose to barge into hell. What shall we do with you?" After hearing the word heaven, Shi Lian and Shi Qingxuan instantly knew. Hua Cheng had already seen through Lang Qiangchu and knew exactly where he came from. Yet Lang Qiangchu completely missed the meaning behind his words and slammed his hand down on the table once more. He was standing at the end of the table, and with this one strike he sent the entire table flying towards the red shadow behind the curtains. Those who had originally gathered around the table dodged to the sides. However, the sitting silhouette behind the curtain didn't move. With a wave of his hand, the long table was flung back in the opposite direction toward Lang Qiangchu. Seeing the incoming flying object, Lang Qiangchu used one hand to push it back, but then realized it wasn't enough and switched to both. Seconds ticked by and blue veins surfaced on his forehead. The once bustling hall now had people and ghosts fleeing and hiding. Shi Lian and Shi Qingxuan debated whether they should step in to help. Since they hadn't been exposed yet, they could continue to help out into the dark, but if they were to walk in openly, they'd risk getting caught together. On the other side, Lang Qiangchu exhaled loudly and finally pushed back the heavy long table again. Behind the red curtains, Hua Cheng's figure was still leaning against the chair. He curled his 5 fingers into a fist and then released them lightly. Instantly, the table exploded into sawdust and flew towards Lang Qiangchu. The force of this gust full of splinters was as sharp as knives, more fearful than any kind of weapon. If Lang Qiangchu was to keep his powers hidden and remain in his mortal form, he wouldn't be able to evade the attack no matter what. Thus, moments after, When his body started emitting a faint light, Shi Lian and Shi Qingxuan understood right away and panicked. Oh no, he's going to reveal his true form! But this faint sheen of spiritual light suddenly vanished as soon as it appeared. Lang Qiangchu had probably remembered he wasn't supposed to reveal his identity on this trip, and caught himself at the last second before quickly withdrawing his power. Although Lang Qiangchu had taken a step back, Hua Cheng, on the other hand, hadn't. The crimson figure sitting leisurely behind the red curtain made another gesture. This time he pressed his fingers together and lightly flicked up. With this one motion, Lang Qiangchu's body lifted off the ground. Like a starfish, his body was suspended on the ceiling of the gambling hall. Not realizing what had just happened, Lang Qiangchu was still incredibly confused as to how he started floating and struggled to break free. Shi Lian sighed in defeat. Now that his power's been sealed, even if he wanted to use it, it's be impossible. Shi Qingxuan agreed. Since Ghost City is Hua Cheng's territory, if he wanted to seal it, he could. Even though Lang Qiangchu had been apprehended before the crowd, at least there was a merit that could be gained from it, which was his identity was protected. If he had continued the brawl and released his powers, it would have been hard to explain as to why Taihua Zhenjun, the Eastern martial god, would come to Ghost City to wreak havoc. After all, over the course of the years, unless it was something extraordinary, heaven and hell minded their own businesses. Seeing that the boisterous guest had barged into the gambler's den and been detained, the crowd that fled returned and gathered in the hall once more. They pointed at the suspended Lang Qiangchu and laughed. Lang Qiangchu had never experienced this kind of humiliation before, and his face flushed red as he wordlessly struggled against the invisible binds. From time to time, a ghost from below would jump up in an attempt to pat his head. Fortunately, Hua Cheng had hung him fairly high, far from reach, or else he would have ended up being the embarrassment of the century. Hua Cheng chuckled from behind the curtains. What an interesting catch today. I'll let you guys play with it. Whoever's lucky and wins big can take it home to roast. The cheers that erupted within the hall were endless. Bet on the roll! Let's bet on the roll! The highest roll can take him home to roast! Ay, this little gaga looks pretty delicious. Who's the fool now that'll teach you to cause trouble around here? The 4 masked bouncers carried in a new long table, and the crowd flocked to the area once again to start the next round of bets. The masked man who was clutching his hand and howling on the ground was long forgotten. The bet this time around was no other than Lang Qiangchu, who was suspended in midair. Seeing that people on the other end were riled up, Shi Qingxuan anxiously paced back and forth, waving his hands around aimlessly. What should we do? Should we go and win him back? Is it better to just fight? Shi Lian asked, Lord Windmaster, how's your luck? Shi Qingxuan replied, sometimes good, sometimes bad. There's no certainty in something like luck. Shi Lian said, there can be. For example, look at me. I've never had any good luck. Shi Qingxuan gaped. Is it that bad? Shi Lian nodded gloomily. Whenever I roll, the most I'd get is snake eyes. Shi Qingxuan knitted his brows, but an idea came to him in an instant, and he slapped his thigh. How about this? Since the most you can get is snake eyes, you should bet on the lowest number. Then anyone who'd roll lower than you. There can't be anyone who'd roll lower than you. Messed up that sentence. After a moment of consideration, Shi Lian agreed. You have a good point. Let me try. So he found a place near the table and threw out a suggestion. Why not switch the rules a bit and see who can roll the smallest? The lowest roll wins. How about that? The crowd around the table was chaotic. Some agreed, some disagreed. Shi Lian decided to take 2 dice and give it a try first. Before he rolled, he chanted mentally, small, small, small. The dice were tossed and the 2 leaned in to take a look. 2 6s. Shi Lian sighed and rubbed his forehead in defeat. Seems not even a change of the rules could change my luck. Shi Qingxuan mirrored him in rubbing his forehead. Maybe it's better we just fight outright. Just then, a grouper walked towards the red curtains and leaned in, as if trying to hear what the figure behind was saying. She nodded, raised her head, and announced, Everyone, can I have your attention, please? The Lord has an announcement to make. Hearing that the Lord had something to say, the crowd immediately dropped everything and fell silent. The grouper continued, The Lord said to change up the rules. Chatter broke out in the crowds. The Lord is the rule. The rule is whatever the Lord dictates. What are we changing it to? The grouper responded, The Lord said he's in a good mood today and wanted to play a couple rounds with everyone. Anyone is free to bet against him. Whoever wins gets to take home that thing above. Whether you want to steam it, boil it, fry it, or pickle it, it's all up to you. Hearing that they'd be betting against the Lord, all the ghosts and demons started to have second thoughts. It seemed that Hua Cheng never really stepped in to gamble himself. Out of all the courageous ones, no one would dare to come up first. Above them, Lang Chongchu struggled with endless determination. He barked, "What do you mean, thing? I'm not a thing! You dare to use me as a bet?" His proclamation of not being a thing was heard by many female ghosts in the crowd. Giggling, they sent him lecherous looks while running their bloody, sharp tongues across their lips as if they wanted to swallow him whole. Shi Lian thought, "This child, it's better if you speak less." After a soundless sigh, Shi Lian stepped forward and said softly, "If that's the case, then please let me have a try." Upon hearing his voice, the shadow behind the red curtains paused before slowly standing up. The Crooper in front of the curtains smiled. "Please come forth, young master." Within the halls, demons and ghosts automatically parted for this brave warrior. When Shi Lian reached the end of the path, the Crooper presented to him the polished black gambling cup in her hands. "Please, go ahead, sir." To all the previous gamblers, she always had a casual way of speaking. Despite the ordinary words that were uttered, her tone wasn't polite in the slightest. However, now to Shi Lian, not only had she switched to using honorifics, the tone she used was also exceedingly polite and respectful. Somebody knows. Shi Lian received the black gambling cup from her with a word of thanks and lightly cleared his throat. Since he never had any experience with something like gambling, he took the cup randomly for a good while and pretended he knew a thing or two. As he moved his hands, he raised his head and glanced at Lang Chongchu, who hung above. Lang Chongchu's eyes were wide open, staring at him. Thankfully, he didn't make a sound. His expression somehow made Shi Lian want to laugh, but he held it back. After a long shake, he finally stopped. Countless pairs of eyes zoomed in on the cup in his hands, and Shi Lian felt that somehow this tiny little gambling cup had grown heavier. He didn't know if there was a right way to flip it. However, just as he was about to reveal the outcome, the Crooper stopped him. "Wait, is something the matter?" Shi Lian asked. The Crooper replied, "The Lord said your cup-shaking posture isn't quite right." Shi Lian thought to himself, "Is there really a correct way of doing this? Was all my bad luck before due to bad posture?" He asked modestly, "May I ask what the correct posture is?" The Crooper responded, "The Lord has invited you to go up, as he's willing to teach you." Upon hearing this, the crowd of ghosts within the den voiced their discontent. Shi Lian heard a ghost mutter, "To think the Lord would teach him, does that mean he's gonna die? The Lord wants to do what? Who is this? Why teach him? Isn't that how we all shake cups? Is there even a right way of doing this?" Shi Lian also wanted to ask the same question, but the Cooper motioned him towards the red curtains. "Please, go ahead." Thus, Shi Lian arrived in front of the red curtains with the black wooden gambling cup clutched in his hands. The silk curtains swayed gently, almost giving life to the red silhouette. The person behind the curtains was standing directly in front of him, with only half an arm's distance between the two. Shi Lian held his breath as a hand parted the heavy red curtains and landed perfectly under his, supporting the gambling cup. This was a right hand, white and elegant. The slender fingers had a red thread tied around the third. Against the pitch-black wooden cup, the white looked even paler and the red more vivid. Slowly, Shi Lian lifted his eyes. A youth roughly around the age of 18 or 19 silently stood behind the red cloud silk curtains. It was San Lang. His robes were still the same maple red and his skin white as snow. That same uniquely handsome face with incomparable youthful expression was now slightly more defined. That shyness of boyhood had morphed into one of calmness, and he carried an air of wild playfulness that couldn't be tamed. The same eye that twinkled like stars never moved away from Shi Lian. Although as bright as a star, there was only one left eye. The other was hidden behind a black eye patch. "We've finally met the real San Lang, Hua Cheng." Oh, I love that part. That's such a good section of story. So fun. So many fun things happening, and a really lovely sort of second introduction to the main romantic interest. You know, we've met him before, but not in his territory, in his true form. This is the two of them meeting each other in a very different way. And there's still so much fun stuff coming. We're gonna have to stop there because these chapters are too long for me to continue another one. It'll probably go on for quite a while. So we will continue next Monday, likely at 2 p.m. I think 2 o'clock is going to be when we do these. So Heaven Official's Blessing will continue 2 p.m. on Mondays. Scum Villain will be 2 p.m. on Wednesdays. And until we finish the Silmarillion, we'll be reading that on Fridays. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much to our members, Jeff and Calame. Who else was here today? Is that everybody? Thank you, members. You are amazing. Silent Leon as well. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so with the links in the description for as little as 99 cents a month. I have new bonuses that are going up. I haven't posted links to them yet, but I am uploading all the various readings as audio files so that members can download them and have them as MP3s and take them on the road and do what you'd like with them. I'm also uploading all of my symbolism videos, including Silent Hill symbolism and other research videos, so that fans can download them and have them offline. That is almost finished, and then I will update the membership page with the new links and let everybody know that you can have those now. I believe that's everything. Should have some more member videos soon. I will let y'all know about that. Silent Hill 3 book is available. Physical should be home here soon, I hope. More details later. Yeah, I guess that's everything. No more streams today. I have to do some things with my folks, my family, but I will be back tomorrow, probably with Fire Emblem. We'll have to see. Thanks again, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.